For over 6 decades, Sally Field was America's darling, an actress we didn't just admire, we adored. From Gidget to Norma Ray, Mrs. Doubtfire to Forrest Gump, she lit up the screen with authenticity, charm, and raw emotional power. But behind that iconic smile and her 2 Academy Awards lies something Hollywood never expected: a list. Not just any list. A personal, brutally honest ranking of 5 actors she found nearly impossible to work with. These aren't your typical Hollywood feuds or attention-seeking headlines. No, this is Sally Field, a woman known for her professionalism and grace, finally pulling back the curtain. And what she revealed, it changes how you'll see some of the biggest names in cinema forever. Some were cold, some were chaotic. One was even the love of her life. But each of them, in their own way, pushed her patience, challenged her process, and tested the boundaries of what it means to be a true professional. She kept quiet for years, until now. And the names on this list? Let's just say, you won't see them coming. At number 5 on Sally Field's list is a man known for his brilliance and his stone-cold silence: Tommy Lee Jones. They worked together twice, first in the early 80s on Back Roads, where they played unlikely lovers, and again decades later in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. But while the scripts called for chemistry off-camera, it was more like static. Field brought warmth and openness. Jones brought a wall. It wasn't that he was rude, just unreachable. On the set of Back Roads, Field tried everything: small talk, jokes between takes, lighthearted connection. But Jones, ever the loner, stayed locked in his own intensity. "It was like acting with a shadow," said one crew member. He gave strong performances but offered nothing in return. For Field, who believes acting is about energy and connection, it was draining. Things got even more awkward in Lincoln. You'd think after 30 years, time might have softened the dynamic. It hadn't. She played Mary Todd Lincoln. He played Thaddeus Stevens. On screen, their characters clashed. Off screen, same thing. Field would try to chat between takes, share historical insights, discuss character motivations. Jones would nod politely, then drift away. It all boiled over during a key White House reception scene. Jones kept giving her line readings, telling her how she should say things to help set up his responses. For someone like Sally, who prepares with surgical precision, that wasn't collaboration. It was intrusion. And when asked years later about working with him, Field gave a masterclass in diplomatic shade. "Tommy is brilliantly talented. Our approaches to reaching the same destination are just different. No anger, no insults, just a pause, and a silence that said more than words ever could." At number 4 on Sally Field's list isn't just a difficult co-star, it's the man who once held her heart: Burt Reynolds. To the public, their chemistry was undeniable. Smokey and the Bandit turned them into America's favorite on-screen couple, and off-screen, they were Hollywood's most talked-about romance. But behind the charm and box office gold, something darker was brewing: a power struggle, one that would quietly unravel both their professional bond and their personal trust. From the very first film, Field saw red flags. Reynolds was at the peak of his fame. He knew it, and so did everyone around him. He was the king of the set, and Field was often treated like a sidekick. She had already won an Emmy. She was building a serious career. But on Burt's sets, she was the girl, not a creative equal, and it didn't stop there. Reynolds would frequently offer notes on her lines, not in private, in front of the crew. Helpful suggestions, he called them. Field called them something else: undermining. Even when she smiled and nodded inside, she was burning. As one crew member put it, she was professional to the core, but you could see it got to her. Their romance off-screen only made it messier. The same control Reynolds tried to exert on set bled into their relationship. And for Field, the lines between lover and co-star began to blur in all the worst ways. But the deepest cut came after the relationship ended. Years later, Reynolds called her the love of his life in multiple interviews. To some, it seemed sweet. To Field, it was manipulation. She believed those public declarations were less about her and more about polishing his image. And when he released his memoir, including deeply personal stories she had never shared publicly, that was the final betrayal. He told his version of their story. She stayed silent, but her inclusion of him on this list says everything she didn't. Even after his death in 2018, Field spoke with dignity. She honored their shared past with a carefully chosen phrase. Some moments never fade. They stay alive even 40 years later. Bittersweet? Yes. But behind that nostalgia was a silence filled with boundaries and pain. Number 3 on Sally Field's list might just be the most surprising. Robin Williams. Yes, that Robin, the beloved star of Mrs. Doubtfire, the king of improvisation, the comedic genius with a heart of gold. Their chemistry on screen? Electric. But behind the scenes, it was a very different story. Field, a methodical, deeply prepared actress, came to set with everything mapped out. Every emotion, every beat, every line. She built characters from the ground up, one layer at a time. Williams improvised, constantly, brilliantly, chaotically. And to Field, that brilliance came at a cost. She was playing a woman on the edge of emotional collapse. He was bouncing off the walls, literally. While she prepared for heavy scenes with raw maternal emotion, Williams would throw in an unexpected gag or silly face just as the cameras rolled. The crew would laugh. The take would be ruined. And Field would have to start all over again. One crew member described it like this. She was playing chess. He was playing jazz. The tension peaked during serious confrontation scenes. Field would spend hours getting into character, only for Williams to undercut the moment with an ad-lib. One makeup artist recalled watching her silently walk off set between takes, needing space just to rebuild the intensity he had accidentally shattered. And yet, she respected him. That was never the issue. What troubled Field wasn't his talent, it was the disruption, the lack of awareness of how his improvisation threw her off balance. She didn't want him to be less funny, she just needed room to breathe. Eventually, she politely asked for a take done exactly as written. Williams agreed. And when that take wrapped, the look of relief on her face said everything. After his death in 2014, Field released a touching tribute. She called him a genius, a golden-hearted friend. And she meant it. But the experience changed her forever. From that point on, she became more cautious about working with actors known for improv, no matter how talented they were. In a 2018 interview, when asked about adapting to other performers' styles, Field said this: "It's like training for months to catch a baseball, and someone throws you a bowling ball instead. She might catch it, but it's going to hurt." Landing at number 2 on Sally Field's list isn't someone you'd expect to stir controversy, James Garner. The star of Murphy's Romance was beloved for his charm, his smooth delivery, his classic leading man appeal. But to Field, working with him wasn't romantic. It was exhausting. Because while the cameras captured sweet chemistry, off-screen it was a clash of eras, values, and quiet condescension. The core issue? Generational thinking. Garner came up in the 1950s, built on tough guy roles and traditional Hollywood hierarchies. Field had fought her way out of the girl next door box and was reshaping her image with bold, serious performances. She'd already won an Oscar for Norma Ray by the time they teamed up. But on set, she was still being treated like a student in his masterclass. According to insiders, Garner would frequently give her unsolicited advice, how to move, how to speak, even how to understand the camera. Now, Sally, what you need to know about lenses is, he seemed to forget she'd been in the business since she was a teenager. Field remained polite, always, but those close to her could see the toll. As one crew member put it, she'd nod during the lecture, then shake her head in disbelief when he walked away. It didn't stop with career advice. The real battle played out in the script. During emotional or romantic scenes, Garner would suggest edits, ones that made his character stronger, more dominant, and hers more passive. Field fought back, insisting on equality between their characters. And when she stood her ground, things got chilly. The friction never exploded, but it simmered, quiet, persistent, undeniable. What stung most wasn't anger, it was dismissal. Field knew her craft. She had the accolades to prove it. But Garner's helpfulness never recognized that. It wasn't malicious, it was a kind of blindness, the kind that assumes the man knows best simply because he's been around longer. Years later, when asked about gender roles in Hollywood, Field didn't name names, but her words landed hard. Some men of a certain generation simply can't comprehend that a woman might know what she's doing without their guidance. No bitterness, just truth. Garner was never cruel, but his outdated view of women, especially women in charge of their own talent, earned him the number 2 spot, and a permanent place in Field's list of lessons learned the hard way. And at number 1, Sally Field's most difficult co-star is the last person anyone expected, Tom Hanks. Yes, that Tom Hanks, Hollywood's nicest guy, the man with the everyman charm, the beloved star of Forrest Gump and Punchline. To the world, he's kindness personified. But to Field, he represented something more complicated, something quietly devastating, because this wasn't about ego, or control, or disrespect. It was about the one thing she valued most, the process. Where Sally Field poured herself into roles, researching every detail, building emotional backstories, living inside her character, Hanks seemed to float effortlessly through it all. He could glance at a script, step into a scene, and become the character in an instant. No warm-up, no breakdown, just pure, intuitive brilliance. And that's exactly what unsettled her. During Punchline, she spent weeks preparing. She took stand-up comedy classes, rehearsed obsessively, stayed emotionally locked into her character between scenes. Meanwhile, Hanks cracked jokes with the crew, casually skimmed his lines, and then, when the cameras rolled, nailed it. To an outsider, it looked like magic. To Field, it felt like whiplash. One crew member said, "She'd be emotionally wrecked after a heavy scene. He'd go right back to joking like nothing happened. She couldn't make sense of it." And yet, she never complained. Not once. The same pattern continued in Forrest Gump. Their characters shared a decade-spanning love story, filled with heartbreak and longing. Field stayed in character between takes. Hanks? He'd step in and out of Gump's world like slipping on a jacket. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't neglect, it was ease. Something Field had never allowed herself. And that ease shook her. Because what do you do when someone achieves in seconds what takes you days of emotional labor? You start to question everything. Your process, your talent, your worth. It's like watching a gifted athlete walk onto the field with no training and score every goal. Meanwhile, you've been sweating, bleeding, grinding, and still feel like you're coming up short. The tension was never vocal. There was no fight, no feud, just distance. Field typically built close relationships with her co-stars, but with Hanks, she kept space. She respected his talent, but she had to protect her own. And in a rare moment of reflection, Field once said, "Some actors breathe and the character appears. Others have to build their roles brick by painful brick. Neither is wrong, but they don't always mix." That was her way of saying it without saying it. Tom Hanks didn't mistreat her. He didn't disrespect her. He just reminded her, painfully, of how hard she had to work to create what others made look effortless. And that emotional dissonance, that quiet, soul-deep frustration, it earned him the top spot on her list. At first glance, Sally Field's list looks like a Hollywood exposé. 5 big names, 5 behind-the-scenes stories filled with tension, control, ego, and emotional chaos. But look closer, and something deeper comes into focus. This isn't just a list of difficult men. It's a blueprint for understanding her. Every name reveals a different way her creative boundaries were tested. With Tommy Lee Jones, it was emotional isolation. With Burt Reynolds, it was romantic control. Robin Williams disrupted her rhythm. James Garner dismissed her experience. And Tom Hanks, without ever meaning to, shook her sense of self-worth. What ties them all together? A lack of respect for her process. Sally Field isn't bitter. She's not vindictive. If anything, she's quiet, careful with her words, always gracious in public. But make no mistake, she remembers. Because to her, acting isn't just a job. It's craft, it's discipline, and it's sacred. She doesn't expect perfection. She doesn't demand that everyone work the way she does. But what she does expect, what she needs, is mutual respect. And when she doesn't get it, she doesn't throw tantrums. She doesn't go to the press. She files it away, keeps it private. Until now. Her list isn't just about who frustrated her, it's about why. It's about how hard it is to be a woman in Hollywood with both talent and standards. About how easily others, especially men, can cross boundaries, dismiss preparation, or steal emotional space on set. But it's also about strength, because through it all, Sally never compromised. She never stopped delivering award-winning performances, never stopped showing up with her lines memorized, her character studied, her heart ready. She just got smarter about who she worked with. And as the years passed, she learned to ask the one question that mattered most before joining any project. Will this person respect the way I work? And if the answer was no, she walked. Sally Field's list wasn't meant to stir up scandal. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Because behind every name, every difficult scene, every silent frustration was a woman fighting to protect her craft. A woman who believed in preparation, connection, and truth on screen. And more importantly, a woman who believed she shouldn't have to fight for that. The actors she named? They're legends. Some beloved, some polarizing, all undeniably talented. But even talent doesn't excuse disruption. Fame doesn't justify ego. And charisma doesn't cancel out the damage it can cause to someone else's process. Field didn't share these stories to tear anyone down. She shared them to lift the veil, to show what it really takes to survive and thrive as a serious actress in a business that often overlooks what happens behind the scenes. She's not asking us to pick sides. She's asking us to pay attention, because at the heart of every story she told is a lesson that goes far beyond Hollywood. Respect isn't optional, not when someone's pouring their soul into their work, not when someone shows up prepared, focused, and ready to give everything. And if that's too much to ask, maybe the problem isn't her. So now that you know the list, were you surprised? Which name caught you off guard the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're hungry for more untold Hollywood truths, make sure to like and subscribe, because the truth? In Sally Field's world, you might like her, really like her, but only if you respect her process.